Hey everyone, my name is Angie, she, her pronouns, and today we have Kane Scott, he, him pronouns. I met Kane several months ago, and each time we spoke, he had so much to share about his experience in the music world. I couldn't help but to ask him to be on the show for you guys to hear what he has to say too. Known for his YouTube videos as Pluffnub and his music, Kane is here to talk about ADHD and how it plays a role in education and in musical learning. Alongside this, he also shares his experience maneuvering the music world with synesthesia, which you'll hear more about during the episode. You can find Kane's music by typing in Pluffnub on YouTube.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm not too bad.
I kind of already feel like I know what we're going to be talking about here, all things ADHD.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good. It's going to be interesting just trying to actually have a cohesive thought. Well, just chatting and then it's going to be just like back and forth and it's just like all over the place pretty much.
But, oh, I know. On average, these like interviews are usually an hour, but I'm like, last time we talked for like 5 hours?
It was a long time. Yeah. And then afterwards it was just like, oh yeah, remember that story that I started 4 hours ago and then totally forgot to come back to it. All right, so I'm just trying to get sure that my camera is like working all right and everything too. Cause I had the problem once before of it just constantly like disconnecting as I was chatting with somebody. So I'm hoping that won't be a problem, but again, just wing it, hope for the best and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. Don't worry. But yeah, in regards to ADHD and, our minds being all over the place.
Yeah.
How does that help or hinder your music?
Oh my God, that is a very interesting thing because I feel like it does a little bit of both because I know for certain there's been so many times previously where it's like I'll have an idea and then just being able to finish those ideas and stick with something long enough, especially too because I feel like when it comes to my personal writing process, how it's like so spontaneous and not planned, because I know you and I've chatted about that a little bit previously about just like the different writing processes where just like if I got an idea that comes in my head, it's just like it just kind of comes out of nowhere. I can't just sit down with a planned writing time and hope to have something good come out of it. So so for a lot of it, it's spontaneous. And then if I got an idea that I really like, trying to sit down and build upon that, like with the intention on finishing something, it is so difficult because I have like folders of like thousands of like half-baked ideas, melodies, rhythms I like or something like that. But the concept of sitting there and just finishing something is so difficult for me. But at the same time, though, it could be seen as a benefit because it's like very much writing in the mood of how I'm feeling at that point in time as well. So it's just like I've got a lot of metal music, but then I'm trying to got a little bit of jazz over here, a little bit of ambient over here, and just like kind of like all this kind of stuff that's just in different boxes pretty much. So I guess sometimes it can sound impressive when I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm writing a metal symphony, but I'm also working on an avant-garde jazz piece, which sounds like super more impressive than it really is. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of like, I wrote like 20 seconds of a jazz line or something, like just some chromatic jazzy sounding thing, and it's just like I don't know, it spawned some very interesting ideas, just the spontaneity of it all. But trying to finish the ideas is definitely the thing that is the hardest for me. Yeah. And I'm sure that's something that I think you and I have talked about before, where just being able to relate to that and just like being able just to sit down and have one cohesive piece finished. Yeah. That is like the hardest thing. Absolutely.
Oh my God. Yeah. My book is like filled with a verse and a chorus. And then I'm like, wait, but now I thought of a different idea for something else. And then I'll move on. And then I'll forget to come back because I moved on like 8 more times within the last hour. So I work quickly, but I also ditch it as quickly as I work on it.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that one for sure.
Yes.
So have you actually discovered any methods that you use to help you kind of finalize your ideas at all? Because that's something I'm still in the process of trying to figure out.
Well, that's difficult. That's difficult.
Yeah, it's been a 15-year long journey for me and I still haven't figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, for me, music is kind of the thing that is my anchor. Like when
Mhm.
everything is constantly all over the place, even though my music is also kind of all over the place, it's all over the place in like the most beautiful way personally.
Right.
Like I like that it's all over the place. I like the fact that, you know, like I'll start a song when I'm 16 years old and then I'll return to it when I'm 26 years old. And I'm like, oh my
Right.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
I kind of like that, but at the same time, I know it can be really, really difficult. So I don't really have a method on how to like staple down, but I do know that working with other people has helped me tremendously. Like they will kind of be a
Oh,
source
really?
of coming back around to the ideas when I'm like, oh my God, wait, we could also write like a song about this and that. And they're like, okay, wait, we're working on this right now. We'll get to
Mhm.
that later.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me because I feel like that's something I've only really started exploring like very recently is collaborating with other people in terms of writing. Because I've got like a buddy of mine who me and him are like starting a project together, and it's like he'll send me riffs, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool. You know, I've totally got ideas on how I can build upon that. But then when it comes to me and writing my own riffs, I'm always just like, then I always just like, I don't know. I get stumped so often. So it's just almost like you have, so it's almost like if you're the one who starts it, you want to try and match your own expectations of it going forward, but it's easier to build off of somebody else's idea because it's a little bit more of an objective piece of music that they throw at you, opposed to something that you're like, oh, I've got an emotional investment in this, and now everything I got to come up with afterwards has to
Mhm.
match that level almost.
Yep.
So it's something that I've definitely been finding a lot of interest in, is like collaborating with other people in terms of writing, because it's something that's like I've never really done it before.
Yep.
Like my entire writing process is very much just me by myself, starting at like, you know, all the instruments, like writing it all out by myself. So the idea of having somebody else throw stuff at you and someone to kind of have a back and forth on, I really enjoy it, but it's something that is just, I'm not used to it. And it's a very new experience for me.
It's always a new experience. Like different people bring different expectations, but in regards to expectations, I don't know if you can like relate to this or not,
Yeah. Yeah.
but for me, my expectations for my music and my writing and stuff, they're first of all, yes, they're high, but they're always changing day to day. I'm like, okay, I'm expecting this out of the song, and then the next day I'll be like, wait, now I'm expecting this. Now I'm also expecting this. So when we collaborate with other people, it's like, you know, it makes it almost a little bit easier because they have their set expectation. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
okay. So I'll work with that expectation, not my own. And it kind of like grounds me a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's kind of what we're saying earlier. Just like it's a little bit easier to kind of look at it more objectively,
Mhm.
if you will. Yeah, and I definitely feel like it's a lot easier to come up with like something based off of that, opposed to again your own expectations. Because again, that's definitely something for me that it changes constantly, especially based off the mood I'm feeling that day. Because it's like I'm
Mhm.
sometimes like, you know, I've got something in the works, and I'm just like, okay, where should this go? And sometimes I'm just like, you know, I'm feeling a little bit grandiose that day, and I'm just like, all right, I want to add like, you know, some strings and orchestration in behind it. But then other days I'm just having like just a, you know, just a, you know, an angry kind of day, and I'm just like, all right, I want to write something like, you know, super intense and just like, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. And then going back to those ideas like the next day in a different headspace, and it's a constant evolution. And I
Yep.
think that also kind of ties into having such a hard time finishing ideas, because it's just like when you look at something that you wrote like, you know, 6 months ago, and then you're in a different headspace, you're like, do I like that as much as I did at that time? Does it capture the mood that I wanted? It's like it's a constant, like it's really hard just to say, okay, this is done, and just leave it at that without constantly wanting to tweak it here and there. And I feel like that is almost just as paralyzing as just not being able to finish something because you don't have the ideas as well.
Oh, 100%. But your
Yeah.
ideas, even your non-grandiose ideas, are always so big. Like your creativity is like when we first talked, you talked about like your jokes and your YouTube channel and stuff. And like your brain works so differently in like the best way possible.
I appreciate that. So I mean, I don't know. It's just I guess just when you we are talking earlier just about like, you know, your kind of environments, I guess, when it comes to, for me, a lot of it's like, you know, all day I'm working by myself, not really talking to a whole lot of people. So you kind of learn to use your brain to kind of inspire itself in ways to come up with ideas. And I was just trying to think out of the box a little bit. I really have no idea how else to explain it, but it's just, I guess, just a lot of thinking on your own, and that kind of just evolves into whatever madness comes out of that in the end.
Do you like that? Do you like the fact that you kind of like every day you're able to be with yourself and kind of think on your own, or would you prefer a different kind of atmosphere?
It's another one of those things. It changes on the daily. It's
Wait,
like sometimes
for context, what do you work as?
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it just depends, because just sometimes I'm very much just like, oh, I like being able to be on my own and just like, just kind of sit with my thoughts all day and kind of, come up with stuff on the fly, or have just ideas kind of just drop in through like my subconscious mind, as we've talked about before. But I feel like if I was around chatting with people a lot of the time, a lot of those ideas wouldn't be able just to sprout out in my head. But at the same time, though, it's just like, it's kind of just getting used to something that you're not familiar with, because I feel like there is definitely a benefit to being able to communicate with other people a little bit more and take inspiration from other people. But it's almost like working a muscle, where just like, if you work one arm and not the left arm and not the right arm, it's like, what's going to get the most results at the end of the day. So it's, for me, it's kind of like my introverted lone wolf kind of muscle is a lot more stronger than my ability to collaborate with others. Even though I like to do it, it's just not what I'm familiar with. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. But
no, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. So it did answer the question. It's up to interpretation, right? But just for context, I do want to mention that, like, where do you work? You work in a factory?
Yeah, it's just warehouse work.
A warehouse, yes, which is kind of why you're able to be with your thoughts all day. But the other thing I want to talk about is insomnia as well. So the nature of your work is long, plus you write music, and music is time consuming, and then you also edit. So you're a very, very busy person.
Yeah, I try to be.
How do you cope with that? Does music help that whatsoever? Like, is that what you do in your spare time? What's your process?
I wish I had a process, to tell you the truth. A lot of it is like very based on what I'm feeling in the moment. And it's like, I go into every weekend just being like, all right, here's a set things that I want to get done this weekend. And then whether or not I actually get to them is kind of just luck of the draw at that point. It's like, whatever I'm feeling at that point in time, it's like, all right, if I want to work on music for 30 minutes, I'll try and work on music for 30 minutes. But with the ADHD thing, though, it's very interesting if there's something that I'm like super into and I've got a very solid deadline set for myself in. My best example is when I was very active making videos on YouTube. And for the most part, it's just like, I would try and get something done for every Sunday, basically. Like, even if it was just a small thing, but it's just like, for me, it's just like, I really wanted to make like, the 10-minute long video experimentations of like, oh, what would it sound like if 5,000 different instruments played the exact same thing at the exact same time? And it's just working on something like that. I definitely get the ADHD hyper focus, where it's like, I have a video that it's all recorded. I have all my video assets already laid out and kind of set where they need to be. And the only thing that's left is me sitting there in my editing software. And I can sit there and edit for a solid 8 to 10 hours straight without having to get up too often.
Yep.
So it's a very unpredictable workflow. And it's definitely, I need to figure out a way to actually schedule my time a little bit better, because I feel like that would definitely help me be a little bit more regimented in getting things done, because I got like so many projects in the go at all times. But it's like, okay, what do you feel like working on right now? Okay, well, this podcast that I'm working on with a buddy of mine, music for the future or something like that. Or just like, there's so many things that are just all over the place that it's like, I really feel like I need to sit down and make a schedule for myself and try and stick to it. Otherwise, it's like, I feel like they got like, 20 things that are like started and they're all going up like, very slowly.
Staggered.
Opposed to like, all right, just focus on one thing, get that finished. Focus on another thing, get that finished.
That is so hard. I can't do that.
It really is. I know, like, every time you and I chat about that too, it's just like, you totally get where I'm coming from about that. Cause there's like just so many things you want to do, but just trying to hone in on one thing until it's done.
Yeah. And like
something else. It's ridiculous.
the worst thing is also I am such an impulsive person. Like this whole podcast thing
Yeah.
was an impulse. Like I just went for it. So because I'm such an impulsive person as well, I start on so many new projects that I'm like, oh my God, my plate is so full, but I'm interested in every single one of these things.
Yeah.
So
Do you often find you get overwhelmed by the amount of ideas that you come up with and try and pursue?
yes and no. I feel like
Yeah.
I do get overwhelmed naturally. I get very burnt out over time. That being said, the amount of things that I do, I'm like, oh yeah, that's normal. And then I talk to someone else who's like, that's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it's my normal.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
But
exactly. No, I totally relate to that one.
burnout is a thing. Burnout definitely is a thing. But it's funny that you mentioned hyper focus. That's actually something that like I don't talk about often. And
Right.
it is a thing as well. So that's like me with my music making, like writing
Mm-hmm.
music. I will sit down for, I don't know, like 10 hours straight. Even when I was practicing piano for my level 10 years ago, I'd be
You told
practicing
me
9 hours.
about that. That is
Yeah.
insane.
9 hours a day. So like I was able to be so hyper focused to a fault almost, because I wouldn't go to the washroom. I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't do anything but like do that thing. And for me,
Yeah.
it's always been music. That's the only thing. So when we talk about music and ADHD, for me, I'm like, oh yeah, like music is the best thing because it's my anchor. And I say that every episode, but I'm only now
Yeah.
realizing, is it? Because it's the only thing that I'm like way too on the other extreme about. I'm like super hyper focused on it.
Yeah.
But,
I find for me, it's just like, it depends on what it is I think because for me, a lot of it's because when it comes to music, I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time. So it's just like, I don't have too many moments where I can hyper focus on my music, because it's like I'm sitting there and I feel like I'm playing like the same thing that I've played like 1,000 times before. It's kind of just like, I'll pick up the instrument and see if something comes out, and sometimes something will, but not too often. So I'm just like, all right, I guess this isn't just one of those moments. It's like, I'm quite happy with where I'm at as a musician, but I feel like it also kind of not feeling like I know what I'm doing half the time does have its like downsides for sure.
does
Because
anyone really know what they're doing though?
good question. I don't even know anymore. And I feel like for me personally, just being able to have that hyper focus in areas that I feel like are something I have a little bit more expertise in. Like I'm definitely not a professional like video editor or anything like that, but it's just like I feel like it's a very you could like, you know where it starts and you know where it ends, so it's a lot easier just to kind of just work on it throughout that period of time, where I feel like music is like, so you don't know where the end is when you're working on a piece of music, or it's just like it's I don't really know where I was getting at with that one, but I guess that's kind of on brand with the episode. But yeah, no, but definitely when it comes to like the process of like video editing or recording music, again, a process that's so just black and white, like, okay, here's where you start, here's where you finish. That's the stuff that I can definitely hyper focus on. But when it comes to a process that doesn't really have an end in sight, that's where I kind of start to dwindle in and out of interest a little bit. And it's very interesting, and I've never thought about it this much until now, but here we are.
So would you ever consider ADHD meds? Is that a touchy topic? Are we okay talking about that?
No, I'm cool with that. Yeah, because
Okay.
it's definitely something that I very much consider, because it's weird, because ever since I started taking like a sleep medication and I'm not like so tired all the time, it's really brought to the forefront of like, oh wow, so your ability to, you know, have shitty focus, it's a lot more to do with like something else and not just insomnia all the time. So it's just like, it's definitely something that I want to explore, because I really want to have the ability just to sit here and just complete a project from start to finish without just doing it for 10 minutes and then getting sidetracked and jumping onto something else. And it's like, I know I do it, but it's so hard to just fight that impulse of just like, all right, I'm kind of getting bored, get distracted, go do something else. And I feel like for a big like chunk of time, it's like why I feel like I haven't quite gotten to where I want to get yet in terms of, you know, the music career and my YouTube career and all that kind of stuff, is just because I just can't sit down and just work on something to completion. It's like I'll be working on a video, and the next thing I know, it's like I hit up a buddy of mine, hey, here's an idea for a podcast, want to start a podcast? And then it's just like adding another thing on top of that. So I don't know, it's definitely the idea of just being able to sit down and just focus on something for a very long period of time to completion is whatever means it takes to get there. It's just like I'm definitely open to like trying a medication of some sort, because it's just like I feel like it's almost, I've heard a term just called ADHD paralysis, where it's just like you have like so many different things kind of just jumbled in your head, and you're just like, oh my God, what do I do, right? Basically. So just being able just to pick something and go for it is definitely something that would be very beneficial for me for sure.
Yep. I feel that a lot. Okay. So yeah, growing up, one of like the biggest things that people always told me, like, I remember getting in trouble all the time for not like staying focused, or I'm lazy. Oh my God. Or I procrastinate too much. And mind you, all my best work is done procrastinating. I just want to point that out.
Agreed.
But which is stressful in its own. Like I have chronic migraines, and procrastinating definitely adds on to that, because I'm here like pulling all-nighters trying to finish up some work, and boom, now I have a migraine. But one of the things that people keep saying was, oh, you know, like put away your phone, turn on do not disturb, delete your messages app on your MacBook so you're not distracted. I'm like, I don't think you get it. There will be a shampoo bottle on a shelf, and I will be staring at it for like half an hour just to not focus on my work, or there'll be a spot on the wall that I'm so intrigued by while I'm doing my work. It's not the phone that's the distraction. It's my world around me.
I was going to say, it's just anything else that you find a little bit more intriguing at that point in time is where your focus kind of goes towards. Because I feel the exact same too. It's just like sometimes, even last night, for example, I was working on something. I was working on a part of my course on trading stocks. And it's just like, I was doing it for 10 minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the kitchen, grab a water or something like that. Next thing I know, I'm sitting on my phone watching like a Tony Robbins video on my phone for like 20 minutes. I'm just like, what, why, how did I get here? Like, what am I doing?
Yep. So one of the best things for me was literally like turning on my music. And I mean, I wouldn't say it helped tremendously, because then I'll get distracted by the words, but it has helped, like being able to study with my music on, or taking like a X amount long break, like 20-minute break, and go improvising on the piano. And that'll kind of like reset. It's like a form of meditation for me, which is why I kind of really like music when it comes to ADHD. I don't know if that's something that you resonate with or not.
That was actually something I was going to ask you about next, is like, whenever you're working on something, are you able to actually listen to music at the same time, or is it too distracting for you?
Yeah. I mean, 9 out of 10 times I'll be listening to classical music while I'm working. And I don't usually listen to classical music as I'm like walking down the street or whatever, but it's pretty much reserved for doing homework. Otherwise I'm distracted by the words, and I'm like, really, even classical music, I'll be like, wow, listen to that guitar, listen to that piano, listen to that crescendo. Damn.
So because I do the exact same thing. Even as we're chatting right now, I've got on my other monitor right here just kind of a jazz cafe kind of thing going on in the background, because it's just like I'm the exact same. I can't even listen to like a song from a band I like and read like a text message at the same time. I'm just like, it is that bad. It's just like, or it's like I have to like pause it and then like just like focus. It needs all my attention. Otherwise it's just like, it's going to be riddled with spelling errors and me not really understanding what it is that they told me. It's something about the words and lyrics and music definitely do that to me, because it's just like if I put on like classical music myself, or just jazz music or something like that in the background, it's like I could definitely just kind of tune that out and let that be a part of the background as you're working on something, and it's not too distracting, but it also creates kind of a nice ambience in the room. Yeah, it definitely kind of just puts you in that headspace to kind of like, okay, this is my time to work. But I don't know. Yeah, that was definitely something I was very curious if that was something else that you experienced as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like, I think reading is one of the best things. I think like I'm totally on board for reading being so healthy for everyone. Like I have so many books, but oh my God, I wish I could get through a book quickly. When people are like, oh yeah, I read that in like 3 days, or I read that in a week. I'm like, oh my God, it took me 3 years to read.
Yeah, I totally relate to that one so much because it's like I've got so many books sitting here too. I'm just like, I started reading the first chapter of one. I'm just like, okay, that's good. This is going to be the one. This is the one on my nightstand at night that I'm going to read before bed. And then next thing I know, a week goes by, I haven't picked it up. And then I'm just like, then when I go back to it, I'm just like, all right, this is not the one I'm feeling right now. So then I go check out another book. I'm just like, oh, that book, that one looks really cool. So then I go buy that one and then I read the first chapter of it. Same thing, rinse and repeat. I've got so many books here that I'm just like, I know my life would benefit tremendously by just reading these and really just absorbing the messages and practicing them. But just to be able to sit there and just read a book for so like, especially now here's one thing that I want to ask you, because for me, when it came to any tests or anything like that I had to take, I've always considered my method of studying and remembering things super abstract, I guess. I've talked with a buddy about this too, and he's like, he's a very academic guy. He's like the kind of guy that, you know, he can sit down and read a book and like memorize the information in the book. So it's just like, yeah, it's so interesting being able to kind of have like a back and forth with somebody about kind of like their method of like learning and kind of, you know, like remembering information. Because for me, I remember a lot of the time, just like, you know, during a period in class where they'd be like, all right, you know, just like a study period, basically. And I'd be like, you know, trying to take in info. And it's just like, if I look at like a definition or something like that, I will try and find something in the room and associate that term with something in the room. So when I can do the, like when I do the test, I can refer back to it. Like I had an example that I told them and I'm having a really hard time recalling it, but it's like, if there was like a definition for a word, and then you're just like, okay, I put this word in this definition and I'm going to associate this word with the clock on the wall or something like that. There's something about that clock reminds me of this word in this definition. I get that. Then, but yeah, so by the time like, you know, the test comes around and it's like something that's like, oh, that's kind of familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. You look at the clock. I'm just like, that's it. That was it right there. I have no idea if that's something that you can relate to at all, but
my thought process isn't like yours. Mine is a little bit different. I mean, that's I guess that's the great thing about brains, but my friends know this already, but I in grade 11 memorized the first 100 digits of pi using a
You've told me about that.
Yep. It's like my fun fact, my very first fun fact that I like to, hey, I know the first 100 digits of pi, but it's because I listened to She's My Number Pi. She's my number pi, 3.14159. And I'd like memorized the song, which had helped me memorize pi. I memorize a lot of really dumb things. And when it comes to memorizing the important things, I never remember them. But yeah, I use a lot of music. Sometimes I'll be studying. And again, when I'm listening to the music, it'll help me recall the song I was listening to help me remember the information I was reading at the time of listening to that song. So it helps to have a playlist of songs that I do know, typically classical ones when it comes to studying, that I will like think back to as I'm writing my exam. But again, I don't test well at all. I am not like, school's great, but it's not easy.
Yeah, well, especially too, like I know we've talked at length about like just different learning methods and stuff like that. And I definitely feel like the idea of like sitting there and listening to a lecture for an hour and a half or however long that class may be at that time, it's just like that is so not, it's so not catered to everybody's way of learning.
Yeah, that's exactly like that's why I re-listen to all my lectures. I can't go to class and listen to an hour and a half. I have to listen to it on 2 times speed.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'd be like the same, or just like I'll be sitting there in class and it's like I used to wear a lot of rings for some reason in school, which I think of that now and I'm just like, my God, if I wore rings now, like I would be constantly aware that they're there and it would drive me insane. But it's just like during but I always used to have this one ring that would like it had like the centerpiece like just spin, and I just remember thinking in classes like I'm just sitting there listening to a lecture and I'm constantly spinning this thing on my finger and I'm just like I'm looking at the class and I'm like I'm listening to the words they're saying, but all my attention is on this weird spinny ring that's on my finger right now, and I'm just like being able to recall what they told me like 5 seconds ago. I'm just like, oh, forget about it. So it's just like the idea of just like sitting down taking notes has definitely helped me, like because I've done a lot of courses like outside of school, a lot of online courses, like that's how I know like literally anything that I know outside of like, you know, the regular school curriculum. But just being able to like, you know, just sit here with my book. I'm working on more stock courses right now, so I've got there with my book and I'm just like taking pages and pages worth of notes in my serial killer looking writing. but it's just like, it helps you retain the info. So I'm just like, even if I have to, watch the class like 3 times and reread my notes, and I've even got notes from my courses like printed on my walls and stock charts and all that kind of stuff. I'm just like,
Damn.
you have all these methods of making sure that it's just like, okay, make sure what they're teaching you sinks in one way or another. And it's just like, everyone's got their methods, but it's like, it just seems like sometimes you got to jump through a few extra hoops for different types of learners, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. And schools do, again, like schools do not cater to different types of learning whatsoever. Like even with online learning, they have so many advantages, like posting the lectures, and they still don't do that, using subtitles, and they still don't do that. And it's like, why are you being so inaccessible when there's literally a million reasons or a million methods to be accessible? Why would you hold that away? That's
exactly. I think it's like we're in a transitional period with that.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, I definitely feel like there's a lot more awareness these days of like, oh yeah, not everybody works the same way, or the idea of like, how the school system works, where it's just like, oh, not everybody's like, going to school to learn to work in a factory for the rest of their life afterwards or something like that. So it's just like, I definitely feel like there's a lot of changes that probably will be coming that cater towards different kind of learners. But I feel like since it's such a big undertaking, since it's like a method that's been used for so long, it's just like, it's in a weird transitional phase that no one really quite knows how to get into yet. And it's just like,
It's also interesting that you mentioned how fidgeting with like your ring distracts you, because I'm the opposite. Like I've already dropped 2 pencils. I don't think you realize, but like, no, I'm like fidgeting with my pencil every single second, because otherwise if I don't fidget, then I will be looking around the room for something to distract me instead of paying attention. And so like me fidgeting does help me pay attention. So it's kind of the opposite from what I'm understanding for you.
But it's interesting too, because after I've kind of realized that ADHD was something that I deal with, I think back to so many things, like instances in life where I'm just like, oh, that totally makes sense now. It's like, I can recall like moments where I'm just like, I'm hanging out with my friends during break or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, let's go get food and like just sit down in the hallway and eat or something like that. But I'm the guy who was always like, no, I want to walk around, or I'm standing, and it's like, I'm standing with my back against the wall and I'm constantly like kicking my heels up against the wall or something like that. And I'm just like, I'm thinking back to moments like that. And I'm just like, you know what, that makes so much more sense now, knowing that that's something that I deal with. Yep. And it's like, I don't know, it's like when you're told that you have like, something like that, at first you're just like, I don't know, it's a weird response, because you're just kind of like, you'd assume you'd be like, oh great, this is something I got to deal with for life. But I'm just like, for me, it was kind of just like, oh, that makes sense. And there's methods of dealing with it now. Like there's an actual, like, a little bit more of a, I know not everybody is so black and white on these sort of things, but at least like there's a label attached to it. So there's methods to help kind of deal with it. And it's not like just this weird, you thought you're quirky all throughout your school years or something like that, which may have also been the case. I don't really know, but you're just like, oh, I just got this thing, and it makes a lot more sense to me now. So it's just like, you just definitely realize, especially when you're getting older, you're just like, wow, this is, so I don't just have like a bunch of spastic child energy. I'm like, I'm 25 years old and I'm still struggling to sit down and read a book or something like that, which like is something that, most adults should be able to do. But I'm just like, I don't know. I'm still not getting it, Yep.
No, I feel the exact same way. But, and you know what, sometimes it makes it so difficult to actually create music. Like I remember when I first discovered all the instruments on GarageBand, I'm like, oh my God, wow, look at all these synth options. Look at all these different guitar options and drum options. Let me just use them all, because I can't pick just 3. So I'm going to spend the next like 10 hours exploring everything and forcing myself to use each and every sound just for it to sound like absolutely terrible. We'll call it experimental.
yeah, it's avant-garde jazz.
Yes, exactly. That's the perfect genre for it. So in that regard, it has made the process a little bit trickier, but on the other hand, like I cannot imagine how much less creative I would be. Like I'm so glad that I am curious into what each and every one of these things sound like. And in regards to sound and color, I remember you mentioning you have synesthesia.
Yeah.
Yes. So would you like to explain what that is and how that contributes to your life?
Yeah. Again, it's another one of those things where I thought it was something that everybody kind of did until like I remember I was watching a guitar clinic with a musician, Devin Townsend, who's like one of my favorite artists of all time. And he was just getting to talk about how he has synesthesia, and he's just talking about the process. And he's like, just talking about how it's just like, oh, there's, whenever I hear a piece of music, I associate that piece of music with a color, a texture, a shape, or something like that in my head. And it's like, it's just automatic. It's not like, you're listening to, like, right now I'm listening to, Jazz Cafe or something like that. And it's just like, the picture is like very fall atmosphere, and just like, oh, I don't think it's orange just because that's what the picture shows. But it's like, it's almost like an automatic thing that just happens in your brain. It's like you hear something, a color, like a texture, a shape comes into your mind. And it's also like that too when it comes to letters and numbers too. It's just like in my head, it's like every single letter or number has a color associated with it. So when it comes to writing music and all that, it's definitely made me very much more into the idea, how to word this without sounding like a crazy person.
Crazy person isn't a thing. That's not no such thing as crazy people.
Yeah. No, but just like when it comes to writing music, a lot of the times, like, because I'm a big fan of full albums, the concept of an album from start to finish. So it's just like when it comes to writing music and trying to get all these pieces of songs and full songs and put them all together into one cohesive unit, for me, it's like it has to kind of fit. Every song has to have a certain color, a certain mood in my head. And it's like, I remember when I first started like seriously taking on a project, it was kind of a joke project that I started on my YouTube channel. And it's just like, well, you know what? It's just like, I made this really weird avant-garde jazz song, quote unquote, but it was literally, it went in every genre imaginable. And it's like, people surprisingly liked it, even though I meant for it to be awful, but it kind of unintentionally spawned this side project. So I had like all these albums in mind, and I'm just like, okay, album 1, it's going to be red, and it's going to be very rusty and chaotic, basically, like a bunch of dissonance, a bunch of notes clashing, a bunch of just crazy time signatures, and just everything about it just like kind of just being like not pretty, almost just chaotic, basically. And then the second album that I had in mind, I wanted to feel blue to me, which to me was a very much more large sound, a lot more orchestration, a lot more just fullness and melody.
Yeah.
Almost like if you were to like a little fluffier feeling, like if you were to look at the sky or something on a sunny day and just be like, oh, I look at that, and that's, very bright, melodic, kind of big, airy, I guess, if you will. Yeah. And then after that, I wanted to make an album that feels green to me and a little slick, and I want it to be like a classic prog rock album. So it's like something that's like, a little bit more 70s Genesis or something like that. And I don't know why that's green to me, but it just kind of is. But it feels like there's just a lot for me when it comes to the synesthesia and like the whole picture of an album. I look at, like, one of my favorite bands also is Children of Bodom, and I feel like they do such a good job because all of their albums are one solid color. All the branding for that album cycle is one color, and it just appeals to me so much because I look at that and I'm just like, maybe the colors don't always match in my head, but it kind of has that same sort of idea in mind. And that's something that I really want to have too when it comes to releasing albums. I want all the branding, all that to really represent the color, the texture, the shape of the music that I'm creating. And it's an interesting process. It feels like sometimes it's a very, I don't know if everybody else will even care, and it's just my own kind of personal hang up, but it's just like, for me, if I could just like start finishing albums that have that one cohesive kind of feel to it, I can look at that at the end of the day and just be like, oh my God, this is like something I'm so proud of. It ticks all of my boxes. It like, the music feels like it's the right color, the right texture, and it feels just right to me. Yeah. And it's very interesting and hard to explain sometimes, but
no, I get it. Do you think that like, because you see so many colors associated with sounds and names, I remember you mentioning my name was Red, which is funny because my hair is red.
I know, that's what you said after. It's like, is my name Red because my hair is red? I'm just like, no, it just is.
But because you see so many colors and textures and stuff, do you think that complements or clashes with your ADHD? Like, do you get more distracted easily, or does it like almost help you conceptualize your thoughts more?
I feel like it does help in its own way. It's a little bit of both. just like
Okay.
a lot of things, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because sometimes it does kind of paralyze me a little bit, because when it comes to, being so, oh, what am I feeling today? Am I feeling a little bit, turquoise-ish with a shade of gray in there or something like that? Or just like if I'm feeling like, if I'm feeling red today or something like that. Again, it's very mood-based. So it's just like, I feel like in a way it's trying to finish something that feels cohesive, and when you're so mood dependent, that kind of makes it difficult to finish something. But at the same time, being able to actually have all my ideas categorized in folders based off of genres, moods, the color that I'm feeling, because that's what I did for this project that I was working on for a little while. It's like I had all the ideas that I had that felt like a certain sound, or not sound, color, and just whatever. I've had that in its own folder. I have the red folder, I have the blue folder, I have the green folder. And it's weird too, because when it comes to colors being in order for me, it's always been red, blue, green, yellow, pink, purple, orange, brown. And I noticed that even unintentionally, I was just like, oh, you know what? The albums I want to make, I didn't even realize it, but it's like, oh, the first album's red, second's blue, third's green. I'm just like, and for me in my brain, 1 is red, 2 is blue, 3 is green, 4 is yellow. I'm just like, it's very interesting. And so it's helped me categorize my work a little bit, but to actually get it finished and just focus on just a specific sound long enough and one vibe long enough, it kind of, like we were saying earlier, it's like trying to work, like, you're making slow progress on 20 things opposed to a lot of progress on one thing. Oh, yeah. So that's kind of what it is for me. But also at the same time, I do get a lot of personal satisfaction being able to just open up my purple folder and be like, oh, okay, this is how this stuff's feeling today, just being able to have that, my ideas kind of categorized in that way. So yeah, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword sometimes, but whenever the day comes when I can finish an idea, it'll be the most satisfying thing ever, I think.
Honestly, the reason I ask is obviously I don't have synesthesia. I do have ADHD, but not synesthesia. So I don't necessarily like personally understand, only through your words can I understand. But one of the games that I play with my piano students is literally like, oh, hey, what's your favorite color? It's purple, for example. Okay, cool. What does purple sound like on the piano to you? And like, for someone like you, that's probably a lot easier of an exercise because you probably know exactly what that sounds like. Meanwhile, one of my other students was like, okay, he said green. So he's like, okay, let me see. G. So I'm going to play G on the piano. There's no R. I'm going to play E twice. There's no N. So like, I'm just going to like rearrange those letters. I'm like, that's like a really interesting way to make songs, to like literally spell out the colors on the piano.
Definitely noticed too for myself though, when it comes to the synesthesia, it's like I've really come to realize a lot of my favorite albums are my favorite albums because they do that for me as well, in terms of giving me the personal satisfaction of the branding. And one of my favorite albums of all time is Rust in Peace by Megadeth. And it's like, musically speaking, it is a very great album. But I feel like the thing for me that takes it to that next level is the fact that the majority of the album, I would say definitely the root notes of that album is F sharp. So for guitar, if you were to play a power chord on an F sharp, it's on your E string, it's 2, and on your A string, it's 4. So for me, since the album artwork is blue and yellow, knowing that it's like, oh, okay, the dominant chord in this is 2, which in my head is blue, and 4, which in my head is yellow.
Oh my God, this is insane math.
So it's like, okay, so the fretting is 2 and 4. That's the dominant chord in the entire album, basically. But also the album artwork is blue and yellow, which I associate with the colors that are used in that chord most frequently. I know I'm explaining this the worst way imaginable. I'm trying my best.
That's okay. You're doing well.
No, but I just come to realize it's just like, because for the longest time I was like, oh, I really like this album, but why is it like in my top 5 of all time? I'm just like, oh, because it really is satisfying for me on a different level. Again, having like, it being blue and yellow and the dominant chord, the fretting 2 and 4, which I associate also with blue and yellow. I'm just like, oh my God. It's just like, it makes sense. It's like when you kind of come to realize that. And it's like, there's a lot of other albums like that too, where I'm just like, not quite as strong as that one. That's like my best example of it. But there's a lot of albums where I'm just like, I look at the artwork, I'm just like, the music very much to me feels like the color of this artwork. Like another one of my favorite albums of all time is The Raven That Refused to Sing by Steven Wilson. And I look at, and I'm just like, yeah, this feels very ghostly, very kind of almost like a green fog, like you would see in like a Tim Burton-y kind of, I'm not exactly sure if that's the best example, but it's kind of like kind of that vibe, I guess. And the album artwork is basically that, just kind of like a lot of like the background is like black, but it has like a shade of green over top of it. It's like, it's got this weird moon looking face thing, but it's kind of got a tint of green to it. And I'm just like, oh, that is beautiful. I just love it. I could stare at it. And like, as I'm listening to it, I'm just like so satisfied as I'm going through the listening experience. So it's more than just a listening experience. It's also just, that's why I like vinyl so much too. Because I'm just like, you get to look at it and just be like, this is the most satisfying thing on the planet right now.
So what's your favorite color to listen to?
My favorite, oh God, it's so mood dependent. I don't know, because I guess for I don't know if I have a solid answer for that one, to be honest. Okay, I'll try at least say what I would be interested in listening to right now, because right now I'm feeling a lot more of the light blue side, a little bit more melody, a little bit more openness. Like I'm listening to Jazz Cafe right now, so that doesn't really do it for me in terms of that. But I'm just like, as soon as we're to hop off here, I've got a couple albums in mind. I'm just like, oh, I just want to maybe check that out right now, just because that's kind of the vibe I'm feeling. But
so it's funny because you do use music ultimately to categorize and put your life in order, I guess, because mood is a color, a color is a sound is a song, and the song is gonna like go with your mood, and it comes around in a full circle. So it kind of does. You create soundtracks for your life.
A little bit, actually. It's very interesting because I've never actually thought about it on that big of a scope before, but I guess kind of in a roundabout way, that is very true. And it's like, maybe, I don't know if it has anything to do with why I find collaborating with people like such a strange experience. Cause it's just like, I'm trying to, I sent a couple demos to a buddy of mine. I'm just like, all right, this is like the vibe I'm going for. I haven't really mentioned, hey, I want to write music that is, sharp and red, because he would just be like, what are you even talking about right now? So it's just like, it's difficult because it's like, I don't know, I'm one of those people that I'm just like, I hate being like the kind of guy that's like, ooh, I've got a vision, because I hate being that guy, because to me that's just like, wow, that sounds,
you literally have a vision, and it's
I guess so. Yeah, I hate being the guy that comes up to my buddies and just be like, no, I don't like your idea right now because it doesn't fit in with my vision. And just like, oh, that's like the most pretentious thing. And I hate that so much. So just like, I don't know, just trying to work with other people efficiently and not confuse them is hard for me. Because it's just, I'm so much like, I want to write full albums. I want it to have this vibe. But if like not everybody, thinks of like, oh, this album needs to sound purple for some reason, I'm just like, it's really hard to describe that to people.
So have you ever written lyrics before?
No. Well, debatable. I actually, in the background, I had a video I recorded a very long time ago that I didn't end up finish editing it all, but it's just like, it's a bunch of old lyrics that a buddy of mine wrote when we were 13, and they are the worst thing you would ever read in your life. So it's like, I don't know, it's weird because for me, when it comes to lyrics, I don't really resonate with words too much. I think this can also tie back to the ADHD thing, because like when it comes to reading, for example, like words just don't resonate with me. So it's just like when it comes to songs and like the lyrics is the last thing I pay attention to. Like it's like I'll know what they say. I know the words. I speak English. I know what they're telling me. But the message never really sinks in. I'm much more of a melody kind of person, or the rhythms, the grooves, whatever it may be at that point in time. I actually have to sit there. Actually, another one of my favorite albums is Ascendancy by Trivium, and like for the first time, like 3 months ago, I pulled up the record and I just like read the lyrics as I was listening to it. And I'm just like, this is the first time I've actually, like, I've been a fan of this album for over 10 years. And this is the first time I've actually sat down and like, oh, this is what they're saying. I've known the words, but just the meaning behind the words has just never resonated with me. So I feel like that's been a very hard thing for me to try and reproduce myself in terms of creating vocal or just lyrics in general, because I'm just like, I'm not a words guy. It's like I'll put down words, but I don't even know for me what they mean half the time.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. Yeah,
like that's why I always think as well that, you know, instruments are so important. Lyrics are really important too. I love analyzing lyrics. I was really big into poetry a couple of years ago, and I'm still like, I love lyric writing. But instruments are so important, and lots of people kind of overlook that instruments hold messages as well, like like non-verbal messages. And I think that's such a powerful thing, and that like a guitar, depending on the way it's played, the chords that are played, the speed that it's played at, same thing with the piano or drums, like that on its own is also poetic just as much as lyrics.
And that's definitely something that I really want to dive more into at some point in the future, just to learn more about just the psychology and like music in general. Because I feel like for me, it's just like, if there's any time I listen to a song and I'm feeling like, oh, I got choked up or something like that, or, you know, anything like that, it's never the lyrics that do it for me. It's always a melody, or just, or if there's like a song that I'm really into, and I'm just like, you know, if I'm in just the mood to listen to something just heavy and extreme, it's just like, just the vibe, the intensity of it is always more powerful to me than the actual words that are being said. It's just like, I could be listening to a death metal song and they could be singing about just like, you know, the happiest thing on, you know, the planet, but just the words don't really resonate with me at all. I'm just taking in what almost what the music is feeding me, more or less. And it's like that, it's definitely something I feel like I do a lot more with my writing. Personally, I try and kind of capture what it is I'm trying to capture through the music and not necessarily the words, even though I definitely recognize how important the words are and the lyrics, especially for a lot of people. But it's hard to put myself into the headspace of somebody else in that kind of way.
Well, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You got your own strengths, you know, and that's like such a great thing on its own as well. One last question. How can people find your music or your art? I'll say your art.
It's mainly on YouTube. Look up Pluffnub on YouTube. I'm not super active on there at the moment because I've just kind of taken a step back because I had a little bit of a personal burnout and I needed, you know, a little bit of a creative break. But that's pretty much where you'll find everything. I guess kind of what I talked about at the end here is what it's all about, kind of creating music in the so bad it's good realm. So if that's where you want to find me, you know, Pluffnub on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Instagram's my most active because I just post self-deprecating memes all day of myself. So, I mean, I don't know if that's your thing, then by all means. And if not, you know, fellow musicians, it's just like you might find enjoyment in it, or it might be your worst nightmare. I don't really know.
No, I saw that post the other day where you posted a picture of you side by side with Spencer from iCarly and how you guys look so alike. You have very, very funny content.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's, I mean, I really enjoy your stuff on TikTok too. Like ever since you told me about your new one, it's just like being able to keep up with that on the daily and finding new facts every single day. I'm just like, that is commitment. And I definitely admire your commitment towards that, to find like new stuff every single day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely time consuming. There's not as many fun facts that are actually fun out there as you'd think. I'm like scared I'm going to run out every moment. Just for context, I have a TikTok in which I sing fun facts every day. This is _Angie with 3 E's. But yeah. Shameless promo there.
Yeah. I'd say you just go on Google and just type in random facts, basically.
Yep. That's exactly it.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I remember after you showed me that, like how much progress you've made on it so far. And it's like, I could definitely see like the appeal to it, like to a wider audience. So I'm just like, no, I just like that. I'm just like, that is so great. Just stick it to the brand. And it's like, I can definitely see it going far. I mean,
it started off because I really want to learn how to sing. So I was like, I'm going to like document my process, but like, how do I make it interesting for people? So I was like, let's do some like trivia.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it for sure.
But yeah, so I'm going to wrap it up here. But thank you so much for being here and sharing your whole ADHD story.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Cool.